Hello, dragon lovers, riders, and slayers, to another very special episode of Commander in General, where in general, we talk about Commander. This newest set, Tarkir Dragonstorm, is kind of a special one for me. Over 10 years ago now, which is crazy to think about, me and my friends walked into our local Walmart on a Friday night, which besides the pool was like one of the only actual exciting things to do in my town, and we decided with our lowly high school paychecks to all collectively try out this whole Magic the Gathering thing we'd been hearing about. Honestly, back in that time, in the pop culture we knew, the nerdiest things that you could imagine being into were Dungeons and Dragons, World of Warcraft, and Magic the Gathering. Now, we definitely were already dorks, whether we would admit it or not, so I don't know why we thought that Magic was so much more dorky, but what I'm getting at here is I think we almost bought them as kind of a joke. Anyways, we went to the shelves and bought two things. Some 2015 core set starter pack bundles, or fat packs as they called them back then, and we bought some Cons of Tarkir packs, which, unbeknownst to us, was the newest set at the time. We went home and played the game, I'm sure totally incorrectly, but as good as we could at the time, and one of us even pulled a Planeswalker, a Johnny Steadfast actually from Core 2015, which I remember collectively deciding to just put aside because none of us knew how Planeswalkers actually work, and figured it was just too complicated for the time being. But little did we know at the time how complicated this game could truly be. So yeah, Cons of Tarkir was really my first set, and actually Fate Reforged ended up being my very first pre-release, and Tarkir World Render ended up being my first ever Commander deck, and I'm sure it was just awful. Anyways, fast forward over 10 years later, and here we are, back on Tarkir, and I'm making mildly successful and moderately dubious Commander content in my very own little microcosm corner of the internet. Who would have thought it would have led us here? So if you so happen to like this little corner of the internet, please show your support by taking just 2 seconds to hit that like button and subscribing if you haven't already, as we reach towards our lofty goal of 5,000 subscribers. Now, I am very excited about this Commander, but can we just stop for a second and say, damn, what a set. While I enjoyed Thunder Junction and Duskmourn, and generally I'm not as against Universes Beyond as a lot of people are, I'd have to say, Tarkir Dragonstorm does really feel like a return to form. It's got some great art, fantastic new spells, some cool lore and world building, and fantastic new commanders. And that definitely goes for today's guest of honor as well, Zurgo. Technically in either his 4th or 5th iteration as Zurgo Stormrender. Zurgo is a 3-mana 3/3. That's 1 red, 1 white, and 1 black for an orc warrior whose text box reads, firstly, mobilize 1. For those unfamiliar with the new mechanics of this set, it says that when this creature attacks, create a tapped and attacking 1/1 red warrior creature token and sacrifice it at the beginning of the next end step. So that gives you a hint already that we're going to care about tokens, but let's keep going. Secondly, Zurgo says that whenever a creature token you control leaves the battlefield, draw a card if it was attacking. Otherwise, each opponent loses 1 life. Now that's some powerful text there. With the right engine setup, Zurgo should be able to draw us tons of cards, and if we can translate our card advantage into a full board of tokens that we can sacrifice at a moment's notice, then we can use the second part of his ability to aristocrat the entire table to victory. Now, you might have noticed that the abilities are almost exactly the same as Garna, Bloodfist of Keld, but the addition of white does change up our options quite a bit here, and I think they'll play pretty differently. But in general, it is just nice that we can build this deck to be pretty all-out aggressive in attacking, but we can also have this side of it that is pretty aristocrat-y while drawing a decent amount of cards. Now, I will say, if you bought the Precon, it is a pretty sweet deck with lots of cool toys to play with, but I think it is a little bit scattered just because of the way they have to build Precons. But that being said, I am going to be incorporating some of those toys into my final build. But please, put your own spin on things and really make it your own. Then you can let me know down in the comments what cards you think I missed, or you added into your own builds. And you can always check out my complete deck list on Architect at the link below. Now, I think the first thing I want to get out of the way here is ramp. Because we really want to be starting early and playing our commander on turn 3, we want 2-mana rocks that tap for colored mana, like all of the talismans, signets, and Fellowar Stone. Wayfarer's Bauble and Soul Ring are also good too. Although this is one of the cases that we may not want to play Soul Ring just because it does give us non-colored mana, but on the flip side of the coin, it does allow for the possibility of having a turn 1 Soul Ring into Signet and then a turn 2 Zurgo, so I'll leave it up to you. The last mana rock I am playing, which doesn't fit into that at all, is Crowded Crypt, which is just cool. It taps for 1 black and gets a counter on it whenever a creature dies. And then late game, we can sack it to get that many zombies with Decay, which can make for 1 big splashy game-ending play later on. But the point I'm getting at is that if we can get Zurgo out consistently on turn 3, then we can start attacking turn 4, and we can immediately start drawing cards off of his Mobilize trigger if we can use that turn to play any sort of sack outlet. Now, one thing I want to clarify before we go any further is that the way combat works, there is a time after damage is dealt where you can still take actions. This is how cards like Reconnaissance can basically give all of your creatures vigilance, because it can untap them and remove them from combat after damage is dealt. This is where we're going to be doing most of our sacrificing if we want to be drawing cards so that we get the maximum amount out of our creatures where they have already done damage, but they're still technically attacking. This is also great because at the end of combat is when myriad spells go away as well, so Zurgo will see those tokens go away. You could kind of build this whole deck around myriad if you really wanted to. I think that'd be a really cool direction to go with this deck. You could add in Blade of Cells and Legion's Loyalty and all your favorite myriad creatures, but I was mostly interested in playing these two. Firstly, Battle Angels of Tyr, who are fantastic attackers being 4 mana flying 4/4s, but also when they deal combat damage to a player, you draw a card if they have the most cards, make a treasure if they have the most lands, and gain you life if they have the most life. And you are likely to hit a few of those when you have one version attacking each of your opponents. But even if you don't, it's still a very efficient attacker that will draw you extra cards off of Zurgo. And the second one I'm playing is Gold Lust Triad, who's a new 5 mana 4/3 dragon with Myriad, and it's going to make us a treasure token whenever we hit somebody. So it's damage, mana, and once again, paired with Zurgo, a little bit of card draw as well. But for now, let's talk about our token generation. Like Inox, Strike Leader, who's not only a really nice low to the ground attacker, but it's going to make us more attackers, and on top of that, it has this really cool ability that says that we can sack it to give the rest of our tokens indestructible until end of turn, which can just be a great protection whether it's during combat or not, but it can also be prep if we want to wipe the board. Not to mention that sacrificing during combat could also draw us a card with Zurgo. Still on the protection side, Voice of Victory I think is definitely worth it, this time giving us 2 attacking tokens and making it so opponents can't cast spells during our turn and muck up our plans. Now sometimes you just have to play token generators to, generate tokens, but I do love these options that aren't very expensive and also fill another role, like the 2 we just talked about that fill the role of protection. But sticking with the mobilized theme here, I think Avenger of the Fallen is decent early, but can really scale with the game, which I do like. Some more awesome stuff in the precon. Within Range is an awesome new enchantment that not only makes us a couple of tokens when it comes in, but then makes each opponent lose life equal to the amount of creatures attacking them, which adds a little bit of insult to our injury. Redoubled Stormsinger is an awesome new one that I am actually really excited about. First off, it's a 3 mana 3/3 first striker, which is pretty good, but it says that whenever this creature attacks, for each creature token you control that entered this turn, create a tapped and attacking token that's a copy of that token. And at the beginning of the next end step, sacrifice those tokens. It's really neat because it sort of pseudo gives them haste by instead creating a hasty copy that we don't mind dying. In fact, in our deck today, we might prefer that it does. Will of the Mardu is a new dual function instant for 3 mana that says if we control our commander, we can choose both of its modes instead of just one. The first of those modes being that we can create a number of 1/1 tokens equal to the number of creatures target player controls, or deal damage to target creature equal to the number of creatures you control. This spell is so versatile, not even for just being a modal card, but that the first ability being to target any player. That means this could save us from an all-out attack from one of our opponents, or it means that it could just double our own minions for an attack, or to make some fodder for a sack outlet. So defensively, it could create a bunch of chump blockers and then blast one of the bigger creatures. It's really, really sweet. Now, Mobilize is great for getting us temporary tokens. The fact that they go away, as long as we have a board state to take advantage of it, doesn't matter to us that much, but it will be good to get some that stick around. And I think in general, getting them from attacking is a good way to keep our tempo tempo up and life totals down. So cards like Adeline Resplendent Cathar, Anim Bakal, Kranko Tinstreet Kingpin, Hero of Bladehold, Mardu Ascendancy, and Hanawar Garrison, yes, we will be playing the matching land, are all great options for that aggressive strategy that we're looking for. Charismatic Conqueror, I think, is one of those Rhystic Study-like creatures where everybody knows what they should do, just let their creature come in tapped, but I think you'll probably catch a lot of people getting greedy. It's another low-to-the-ground creature that says whenever an artifact or creature enters the battlefield untapped and under an opponent's control, they may tap that permanent. If they don't, we create a 1/1 white vampire creature token with lifelink. So either way, you can slow down other people's game plan, or they can give you a little and further your own. Now these next two cards are going to kind of bridge the gap between token creators and our sacrifice outlets. That's Caesar, Legion's Emperor, is a less traditional sack outlet, but it is really versatile. It's a 4-mana 4/4 human soldier that says whenever you attack, you may sacrifice another creature. When you do, choose 2 of his 3 abilities. The first of which will make us a few hasty tokens, tapped and attacking. The second of which will draw us a card and lose us 1 life. And the third of which will deal damage equal to the number of creature tokens we control to target opponent. So all really good options for responding to different types of board states. So I really like this in our strategy, and since it's during combat, we will most likely be drawing another card off Zurgo, which makes it even more worth it. And then lastly, we have Spawning Pit, which is just a slam dunk for us here. This is an artifact that is not only going to cost us just 2 mana, and it's a free sack outlet that simply says sacrifice a creature, put a charge counter on this. But later on, we can pay just 1 mana and remove 2 counters from it to create a 2/2 spawn token. When we're talking about getting an engine going, this is exactly the type of card we're looking for. There are also, of course, combos with this card, like with Pitless Plunderer and Anointed Procession that go infinite off this, so that's an option as well if you want to play that way. But let's go a little deeper on sack outlets. In this deck, it matters a lot when we sacrifice so that we get the desired effect out of Zurgo. So the typical sack outlets of Ashnod's Altar and Phyrexian Altar are fantastic because they give us the flexibility of timing, although they are a little bit been there, done that. So I do want to take a look at some more interesting options as well. Now, first let me get out of the way some more popular ones. Yes, of course, Skull Clamp. If you'll be creating 1/1 tokens, you're gonna be playing this card. And when you want to be killing those tokens, even more so. And then one that's definitely picked up some steam in recent time, Yawgmoth, Thran Physician. This guy is great just because it's filling so many purposes at the same time. It's a sack outlet that puts negative counters on a creature, letting you blast away a bunch of smaller pieces if need be. Plus it draws you a card. They didn't need to put that on there. And to top it off, I don't know if we'll find ourselves doing this a ton in this deck, but you can also discard a card to proliferate. And if all goes according to plan, we should find ourselves with a decent amount of cards in our hand. So the option is definitely on the table. Viscera Seer, Carrion Feeder, Goblin Bombardment, as well as Phyrexian Tower are all great popular options as well for obvious reasons. But let's take a look at some you might not be playing, like Commissar Severina Rain. They're not only going to drain our opponents when we attack, but the second bit of text on it is indeed a sack outlet that will gain us a bit of life and indeed draw us some more cards. Warren's Soul Trader gives us treasure instead of mana, so we can save up some of that mana for a later turn if we like. I do actually really like Attrition as well. It does fill this role of removal for us, although it is restricted to non-black creatures. And then one last one here is Whisper Blood Liturgist, which is going to let us sack a couple of our tokens to get some of our more important pieces back from our graveyard. I think recursion for us is going to be really important because we're going to be trying to play really fast and low to the ground at the beginning of the game, and if we play a lot of these spells earlier, we're bound to get blown out sooner or later, and we need to be capable of rebuilding. I personally like forms of recursion that are repeatable, and in white we see a decent amount of these options that bring creatures back based on low mana value or power, such as Sun Titan, who can bring us some creatures back turn after turn with mana value 3 or less. If the power lines up in your own version of this deck, Alesha Who Smiles at Death can bring back creatures with power 2 or less, and of course, a card I'm very happy about, just Smile at Death, in honor of Alesha. This card can bring back up to 2 power targets, and then put a 1/1 counter on each of them, which is pretty fantastic. But on the spell side, Victimize is always a great, really efficient option. Reanimate is great, and Savine's Reclamation has Flashback, which could come in handy. And one last spell I like here is Lich Knight's Conquest, which says that we can sack any number of artifacts, enchantments, and or tokens to return that many creatures from our yard. This is great because it can act as a one-time sack outlet for us, and then we can trade a bunch of our tokens for engine pieces that we may have lost along the way. So being able to rebuild helps against board wipes and the like. However, it could be nice to just, not have got our board blown up in the first place. So building in some cards like Duty Beyond Death, which can turn all of our creatures indestructible, Teferi's Protection, which we all know is great for dodging board wipes, but also Clever Concealment, which we can cast with its Convoke cost for even cheaper than Teferi's Protection. And the nice thing about these last two for our tokens is they don't actually get exiled where they would disappear. You just treat them as if they have left the board. But not talking about board wipes, but more on the attacking side, I think Inkshield is another fantastic late game play that could replenish our board with tokens if we're running out of gas. Reconnaissance can give our creatures vigilance, like we mentioned earlier, but also protects them from bad attacks. Another really cool one here, whether it's you or your opponent wiping the board, is Afterlife Insurance, which firstly draws us a card to replace itself, which is always nice, but also gives all of our creatures Afterlife 1 until end of turn, which means that if they do die, then we get a 1/1 token with flying in return. It can also honestly be nice for one big turn when you just want to be doing a lot of aristocrating, but let's put ourselves on the other side of that wall. If we want to remove some stuff or wipe the board, what tools are at our disposal? Well, besides cards like Attrition on the targeted removal side, I am trying to keep it pretty efficient and versatile so that we can spend mana on what we really want to be spending mana on. So Anguish Unmaking, Vindicate, Deadly Rollick, and Abrade are all great options, but I do like the idea of playing Dictative Airbows just to keep our opponent's boards empty. Speaking of keeping our opponent's boards empty, board wipes. So I think these are going to fit into a few categories for us. One that works out really well is discretionary board wipes that destroy based on the creature's power or mana value, like the -3 on Elspeth, who can also make us tons of tokens or give us a game-winning emblem. Austere Command, which among other options can destroy everything with mana value 4 or greater, which is sweet. And a really cool one for us is Settle the Wreckage, because we could actually use this on ourselves after we've already dealt damage with our creatures to search for a bunch of lands. And on top of that, we would draw a bunch of cards with Zurgo. I do also really like Meathook Massacre because while it isn't one-sided, it will do a bunch of draining, which we want. We will be looking at token draining and token damage in just a moment, but we definitely do want these types of effects. And the last category of board wipe I like is the ones that fill up our board, like Martial Coup or White Sun's Twilight. So at least if we do need to get rid of all of it, we start out a little bit ahead back on our game plan. These big X spells that give us tokens I think are actually a really great way for decks like this to scale into the late game. They'll let us still keep our curves low when we want to be aggressive and not have a bunch of dead cards in our hand, but still be able to scale with our mana as the game goes on. So cards like Secure the Wastes and Grand Crescendo are great for being instant speed, Grand Crescendo also being a great protective spell by giving them indestructible. Tempt with Vengeance, Song of Totentaz, and 4th Aeorlingus have the bonus of coming out with haste, although the instant speed ones can always be played on the end step before your own, so it's almost like they have haste. Creatures having haste in general is always nice when we're playing a token strategy, and for what we're going for here, I actually think Enduring Courage and Ogre Battle Driver are pretty sweet options to give haste to the rest of our crew. But before we get past all this token talk, I do want to talk about weaponizing our tokens into damage. We have already seen examples of this like Meathook Massacre and Zurgo himself, but we have tons of other options to consider. Mono Red on one hand has options that are better suited for damage and generally easier to cast color-wise, like Impact Tremors, Agate Instigator, and of course Perforos, who is also nice for that reactivatable token buffing. And I do just want to mention here, since we're on the topic of ETB effects, that if you are itching to draw more cards, Mono White, on the other hand, instead of doing damage, can be drawing us some cards off of our small tokens and creatures, like with Enduring Innocence, Welcoming Vampire, and Mentor of the Meek. However, White can turn our tokens indirectly into damage with cards like Cathar's Crusade, which can get out of hand so fast by putting a 1/1 counter on each creature whenever a creature enters the battlefield. And actually, one similar card from the Precon I will be trying out is this Commander's Insignia, which buffs all of our creatures based on how many times we've played our commander. It's definitely better suited for a partner commander situation, like it'd be great in a Rogue Rock and Yoshimaru deck, but I do just want to mention it because I think it's pretty cool. Moving on to Orzhov, for creature damage though, they are more focused on draining with cards like Blood Artist, Cruel Celebrant, Ellis Ilkor, Mirkwood Bats is nice because it lets you double dip a bit, Bastion of Remembrance, which is a little harder to interact with as an enchantment, and Kambal, Profiteering Mare, who is nice because they also have this cool ability that can copy tokens our opponents are making, and they don't just have to be creatures either, which is nice because then we can copy treasures and clues and all. And we can really start blowing our damage and draining through the roof when we factor in some enhancers, I'll call them. Now, you have to be careful about playing too many of these win more cards that already rely on you having your engine going, but Anointed Procession and Mondrak Glory Dominus are great for multiplying our tokens, especially Mondrak since it doubles as a sack outlet. Ocelot Pride is also nice because it's so cheap, but once we have the city's blessing, it'll not only make us a new token on our end step, but also give us a copy of each token that entered the battlefield this turn. The new Elspeth also multiplies tokens on top of being a token generator, buffer, and it has some targeted removal built in. So I really like it here. On the literal other side of things, Teysa Karlov instead deals with our death triggers, so they really help shoot up our aristocrating damage on top of giving our tokens vigilance and lifelink. And lastly, Ishin, the Heavens as One, can double many of our triggered abilities. But with that, that does bring us to the end of our video here. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for seeing it through to the end. Zurgo is a great, aggressive, awesome commander, and I'm just so glad to be back on Tarkir. Please help me out if you enjoyed this one by clicking that like button, and if you haven't already, by hitting that sub button as we slowly climb to our goal of 5K subs. Let me know what you think of this deck tech, how you'll be building your own deck, and what cards you're super excited to get your hands on from this set, all down in the comments below. I reply to pretty much everything, so let me know. But until next time, this has been Commander in General. Thank you for joining me for this Zurgo Stormrender deck tech, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.